Hi, we are going to read chapter 8 and following today out of this book called Angels in the Bible. Joshua and the commander of God's army. And you can read Joshua chapter 1 through 6 in the Bible. Now, in this part of the story, there's something called the Ark of the Covenant. And you can ask your mom what that is, okay? But briefly, it's where Moses, after they received the 10 Commandments from God, which I think Felicity probably learned them in Catholic school, they put them in the Ark of the Covenant, okay? All right. So here's the next story. Joshua and the commander of God's army. Sometimes angels bring messages that are hard to understand. For example, an angel told a man named Joshua to do something that made as much sense to him as a fish riding a chariot. But Joshua obeyed, and everything turned out just fine. Now Joshua was the leader of the Israelites. He was all set to take them into the promised land, but people known as the Canaanites were already living there, and they weren't going to move. Jericho has really high walls, Joshua thought to himself. How will my army get over them? Plus, the soldiers there are as tall as giants and fierce as tigers. When God saw that Joshua was troubled, he spoke to him to calm his fears. Be brave, Joshua. Don't be afraid. I'll stand by you, God said. So the people set up camp near Jericho, and Joshua went to check out the city walls again. Attacking this fortress was not going to be easy. His men had no wooden beams to ram into the wall. They had no ladders to scale it. They had no stone throwers to break it up. They had something better, though. They had God. Suddenly, a tall warrior in full battle armor stood in front of Joshua. He had his sword raised, and he looked very scary. Joshua thought it might be one of the giant soldiers from Jericho. Are you for us or against us? Joshua asked bravely. Neither, the man said. I am the commander of the army of the heavenly hosts. I'm here to fight the Lord's battle. Joshua bowed his head low. Did you bring any orders for me? He asked. Take off your sandals, the angel said. You're on holy ground. This wasn't exactly what Joshua expected, but he wasn't about to question the commander of the heavenly hosts. So off came his sandals. After that, Joshua knelt while the angel told him how God was going to take Jericho. It made absolutely no sense, but if Joshua had learned one thing in his lifetime, he knew to obey God and trust in his way. So he got the details and returned to camp. Here's God's plan, Joshua told the people. Starting tomorrow, you soldiers will walk around Jericho once, in silence. No talking, whistling, humming, nothing. Not a sound but marching feet. The priests will come next, blowing their ram's horns. And behind them, the other priests will carry the Ark of the Covenant. A rear guard will follow. Oh, and we'll do this for 6 days, Joshua said. On the night before the 7th day, Joshua had more instructions. Tomorrow we're doing something different. Instead of once, we're circling the walls 7 times, he said. When we're finished, the priests will give one long, loud blast of their horns. They're called shofars. Then I'll yell, shout, Joshua said, and I want every man, woman, and child to scream their heads off. And don't stop until I tell you. The next day, everyone marched around the city 6 times. Stomp, 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 with the horns blasting. Ba-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da. The priest stopped, took a breath, and blew his horn. At the same time, Joshua hollered, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. So these are the horns right here, see? These are all the horns. There's videos of this really happening on YouTube if your mom wants to show you. And this is the army, and this is the Ark of the Covenant. It was made of gold, solid gold, and it had 2 angels on top. And inside was God's law, and nobody could touch it except for those that God said, and that's all. Okay? All right. A great roar went up, and those huge walls came tumbling down. Then Joshua and his men charged in, defeating their enemy, and took over the city. Because Joshua trusted God, he won a battle no one thought he would. Isn't that a funny way to win a battle? After they did all that walking and shouting, the walls came tumbling down. Okay. Now this next story is about Gideon. Gideon asks for a sign. Judges 6 and 7. God sometimes asks people to do things they're not so sure they can do. That's what happened to a man called Gideon. But God sent an angel to assure him he was definitely the man for the job. Now at this time, the Israelites had sinned and turned away from God. So God allowed their enemies to conquer them. Things got so bad, people hid in the hills and lived in caves. In their misery, they cried out, "Lord, please save us." And God heard them. So one day, when their leader, Gideon, was gathering wheat, God sent an angel. The angel arrived quietly and sat under a nearby tree. "God is with you, mighty warrior," the angel said, scaring Gideon out of his sandals. "With me, sir?" Gideon asked. "If the Lord is with me, why are such awful things happening?" The angel pretended he didn't hear Gideon. "I'm sending you to save your people," he said. Gideon sighed. "With respect, sir, why me?" he asked. "My tribe is the weakest, and I am no hero. I think you need someone else." "No, Gideon," the angel said. "God needs you. And don't worry, you will defeat your enemies." But just before the fighting began, God said, "You have too many men." Then God explained, "I want the people to realize it's not you and your army who are saving them, but me, the God who loves them. So tell any man who's afraid to go home." Gideon did, and 22,000 men walked away. But God still wasn't satisfied. So he showed Gideon how to cut his army even more until only 300 soldiers were left. A nervous Gideon gave each fighter a horn, a lit torch, and a clay jar. Then he stationed them around a hill. The idea was to surprise the sleeping enemy soldiers. "When I give the signal," Gideon said, "do what I do." A second later, Gideon shouted, "For the Lord and for Gideon!" He blew his trumpet and smashed his jar. His men did the same, and the enemy soldiers bolted upright. That's when Gideon and his men charged into the camp. As they did, God caused the enemy to get confused, so they turned and started fighting each other. When the battle was over, God had given the victory to Gideon. 300 men had defeated thousands. After that, there was peace for 40 years, and Gideon never had to bother an angel for a sign ever again. Okay, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to read again. Okay, thank you.